Hariom and greetings from Pittsburgh. Self-sacrifice is really an indication of how evolved one is. The less one sacrifices themselves, the less evolved one is. And oppositely, the more you think about another, others, all, the more evolved you are. Now, connecting this more to our effort, the more self-sacrifice one engages in, the more evolution one facilitates, the more safe one feels and one facilitates. Evolution and safety are synonymous. If we measure the progressiveness of a nation, part of that would be how safe it is, correct? A regressive country is one where nobody feels safe. And this is why we have our efforts for safety or efforts for evolution. We may use the word society, but really the beneficiary is the individuality. In this effort, I began sharing how safety is required for self-development. Even when I teach for 15 minutes, for 30 minutes, for 45 minutes, I have a whole setup with books and water and so on. I try to ensure that my children are as far away from me as possible for my safety, for your safety. Correct is required for self-development. In our second knowledge session, I described how we have to work not harder, but smarter. We can cause some change, but it's really policymakers that can affect greater change. They write the policies for our roads, for our schools, for our purchasing habits. And that's why in this effort, there's an element of giving resources, giving time, giving effort. Which is the most important? Giving effort. That is to communicate to these policymakers how we want change. We will give our time and resources so that these policies can be enacted. In our last knowledge session, we were reflecting on accessibility. The more accessible a firearm is, the greater the propensity for me to use that. But if I can't access it, the chances of me using it is little or not. Try to make this more common in the sense of time. The more time you have, the more you waste time, correct? The less time you have, the less you waste time. Now I zoom into more knowledge on effort for safety in reference to firearms, a more serious component of knowledge or understanding. Many people I know right now have COVID. Now, if we rewind to 2020, 2021, COVID made all of us, especially your friends and family, live more closely. You couldn't go on vacation, you couldn't go to work, as into an office. With closeness comes conflict. Yesterday, I was sleeping with Shuka, and so with that closeness comes conflict. He kicked me many times, he punched me many, many times. When I sleep by myself, there's no closeness, so no conflict. Now, with conflict, what should be invoked from that is compassion. But often what happens is not compassion, but rather escalation. Escalation of that conflict. And in reference to family and friends, domestic violence, intimate partner violence. instead of compassion, dissolving this conflict, this gets escalated. And this is not a new subject to anyone here. This happens in every community. This happens in our community. Sometimes we deflect saying, this doesn't happen. This doesn't apply. This does happen. This does apply, and it affects everyone. As simple as, if I'm I'm using a light anecdote, if I'm in a bad mood, it affects everyone else's mood, correct? If I'm being harmed, it affects everyone around me, near and far. Our efforts for safety help in such comprehensive ways. We are all interconnected. And so everything I've shared in terms of we need this for self-development, this is our responsibility for us to create changes in accessibility. We are the beneficiary. Do this for you and for all. Team?
So let's get started. As Vivekji mentioned, today's topic is intimate partner violence. So we'll get right into it. We're gonna go through 3 questions and check our knowledge and what we know. So let's see, what percentage of intimate partner homicides in the US are committed with a gun? Is it 25%, you think? 50%, 66%, or 80%? If you guys want to share in the chat, that would be great. Okay, so the answer is 66%. It's a staggering number. Let's go to that next question. Access to gun makes it X times more likely that a woman will die at the hands of a domestic abuser. You think it's twice as likely, 3 times, 4 times, or 5 times? The correct answer is 5 times more likely. And the last question is, perhaps, what are some forms of common sense firearm safety legislations? So strengthening background checks, addressing firearm trafficking, is it encouraging safe firearm storage, or is it all 3? I think we all have a good idea of how bad the situation is. So let's, there was a recent Supreme Court decision in June. I had seen a headline, but found this video, and let's listen to it. It's a short clip.
The Supreme Court upheld a gun control law intended to protect victims of domestic violence. Natalie Bram reports from the Supreme Court.
It's the decision gun safety advocates had hoped for when they rallied in front of the Supreme Court during November's oral arguments.
We know that lives are on the line.
In an 8-1 ruling, the justices upheld a federal law that prohibits people under domestic violence restraining orders from having firearms.
This is the first time we've seen this Supreme Court in a long time actually rule in favor of regulation of guns.
Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, "The law uses common sense and applies only after a judge determines that an individual poses a credible threat of physical violence." The court ruling against the challenge brought by 23-year-old Zaki Rahimi of Texas, indicted for possessing a firearm while having a restraining order against him.
This case stemmed from the High Court's Bruin decision 2 years ago, which expanded gun rights, saying history and tradition should determine whether laws regulating firearms are constitutional.
While history has a role to play in constitutional analysis, it has to be calibrated, against the issues of present day.
Emma Brown is the executive director of the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence.
It's important to remember that this case, all it does is preserve the status quo. And the status quo in this country is a tremendously dangerous country for women and for domestic violence survivors.
Legal experts expect Friday's opinion will provide more clarity for lower courts as they decide other Second Amendment cases.
Justice Clarence Thomas, who was the author of the 2022 decision expanding gun rights, was the lone dissenter in this ruling.
Yeah, so I think it's a small win, but it's still a win. And I think something that could be used in the future as a precedence for other cases related to firearm. What struck me when I saw this clip was, it was almost unanimous, which is fairly unusual with the Supreme Court justices. Usually it's along party lines, but I was happy to see that this was almost unanimous. I know it's hard for us to even write a letter because we get busy right after. So we thought that perhaps we just do this right online. It's extremely quick. It'll take a minute. I did this yesterday and it took me less than a minute. So Lavanya, if you can please paste this link, and if you just click on it, you'll go to this screen right here, which is what's good about this isn't state level, it's federal. So this will tell your U.S. senator to co-sponsor this bill to help the stopping of the gun trafficking. And you can quickly, if everyone's good, we'll keep moving forward. So this week, if you have time, it would be great to learn more about domestic violence and firearm safety. There's an app here that will actually, I'll just kind of pop. It's as quick as just multiple cards. You read through it and click next, next, next. And, as you want to learn more, there's more links in there around what you can do. So perhaps we think about taking one action just during this week that you want to help with. And with that, we want to thank you for your time. And with that, we will end with Shanti. Thank you so much. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.